Good afternoon. About 5, maybe 6 years ago, I started my own painting business. Now, I was having a lot of trouble at first because I couldn't find painters. I started off with 2, but they ended up quitting on the first day of the first job. So, for about 3 weeks, I was stuck without any painters, and I had a lot of work that people wanted done. So I did a lot of painting on my own, and I used to come home covered from head to toe in paint. And one particular day, I came home with a lot of paint on my glasses. And my girlfriend at the time looked at me, took one look, and said, "Can I clean your glasses?" And I looked back at her and I smiled and decided to be all smart. So I said, "Don't you mean may I clean your glasses?" She did not like this. She was just not impressed. So she said, "I wasn't asking if I may clean your glasses. You can clean them yourself. I was asking whether I could even clean your glasses, whether it's possible to clean your glasses, because they're so covered in paint." So the point of this story is that modals can be easily confused. You can have one modal that you intend to use to mean something in particular, when really it means something completely different. And can and may are common modals that get misused, mostly can in replacement of may. So somebody will say, "Can I take your order?" when really what they mean is, "May I take your order?" Because "can I take your order" is asking whether there's a possibility of taking the order. Whereas "may I take your order" is asking for permission to take the order. But you'll see it a lot. People will use "can" to ask for permission, even though it's not appropriate, it's not correct. So I'm not going to start off with "can" and "may" today, because they're very complicated and this is a short lecture. So let's start off with 2 modals that sound very similar and rhyme, but are very different in meaning. So those 2 modals are should and would. What are modals? Let's review. Modals are auxiliary verbs that express particular meanings. They can express ability, whether you are able to. They can express necessity, and that's something that is needed or required. They can express probability, and that's the likelihood of something. They can express permission, which is whether something is acceptable. They can express advice, which is something that should be. And lastly, they can express future time, and that's something that will happen. So modals can be used in a lot of ways, and there's probably more ways beyond this, but these are the most common meanings of modals. So what? What's so important about modals? You probably have a base understanding of them. You probably use them when you speak in English quite often. But the thing with modals is they're all about choices. You have to make choices when you use modals, and it often comes down to using the right modal to say what you intend to say. So it's important to recognize the meaning potential. This is a term we use in applied linguistics. The meaning potential of each modal. Meaning potential is the extent to which a unit of language can mean. And it's important to recognize this because then you can use the unit of language appropriately. Looking at should and would, they appear very similar and they rhyme, but they have very different meaning potential. Let's start with looking at the primary meanings, the main sort of meanings that you'll encounter according to Azar and Hagen, and then we'll move on to the extended meanings as put forward by Cohen. So 2 different authors, they disagree a bit in the primary meanings, and I'll get into this. But let's start off with a brief table with should and would. So should, according to Azar and Hagen, can mean advice. So you could say something like, you should see a doctor. Now would has two primary meanings according to Azar and Hagen. It can be a polite question. So would you please open the door is an example of something you could say. Or it can be a statement of fact, as in, I would like some help. So these are some of the primary meanings, and Cohen agrees with the primary meaning of should is that it is advice. So he says that advice is the only primary meaning of should. The example he gives is, you should ask for help if you need it. And I think that's a great example because it's very true. The only way you're going to get help is if you ask for it. And there's also inferred probability, so this is an extended meaning of should. You could say something like, the bus should be coming in 10 minutes. You're not giving advice about the bus. You're simply saying what is likely to happen. It can also be used for reproach or reprimand. So if you run into somebody who happened to just steal money, you could say, you shouldn't have stolen that money. And as you can see, shouldn't is should in the negative, because it can be in both the affirmative and the negative, and so can would. So shouldn't is the exact opposite of should, and wouldn't is the exact opposite of would. That's all the meanings that Cohen has for should. Now let's look at the meanings that he has for would. So he has a lot of primary meanings for would. He has, as we said earlier from Azar and Hagen, it could be a polite request or question. So that's, would you please stop talking so loudly? It can be a statement of fact, as I say. He would like a fresh cup of coffee. He would like a fresh cup of coffee. It could be the past equivalent of will. So if we take that first sentence, would you please stop talking so loudly, and put will in replacement of would, you get, will you please stop talking so loudly? And it means the exact same thing. So would can also be a prediction in the past. You could say something like, I thought it would rain any minute. You're saying a prediction that you had previously, beforehand. It can also be future in the past. So you could say, after dinner that evening, we would meet just 3 more times. So you're saying something that would happen in the future, but it's occurring in the past. That's the primary meanings that, according to Cohen, of would. And then we have some extended meanings as well. Because would is a very broad word. It can be used in a lot of ways. It has a very vast meaning potential. With some of the extended meanings, there's the regular action in the past. For example, they would not leave us alone. There's hypothetical results. You could say something like, he would have drank the coffee if it were from Tim Hortons. And you might be wondering, what's Tim Hortons? Well, Tim Hortons is the Canadian company that is absolutely everywhere. There's a coffee shop called Tim Hortons pretty much every few kilometers that you travel. And Canadians just drink the stuff like water, I tell you. It's crazy. And there's the hypothetical results, and then there's also inferred probability. So another Tim Hortons example, there probably wouldn't be a lot of people in line at Tim Hortons. So you're saying, let's go to Tim Hortons because there probably wouldn't be a lot of people in line. As you can see, there's a lot of meanings for would. And it's interesting that you can use should and would together in a lot of ways. Mostly in ways of saying that should is stating advice, and then would is the result of following that advice. That's the most common way that should and would can be used together. So you will almost definitely encounter this if you travel to an English-speaking country. So this is going to be the focus of our task at the start of next class. Let's look at how should can be used for advice, and then would can be used for the result. So you could say, you should listen to your children then they would respect you more. So that's using the two together. And what I want to point out to you though is that the mind demands rules, the facts demand exceptions. So what I mean by this is grammar is full of exceptions. Pretty much every grammar rule that I give you will have some exception to it, or multiple exceptions usually. So you have to keep this in mind. But that doesn't mean you can't follow the rules. You can't focus on using should and would together in that way, for example. But it's to be open to new ways. And as you use the language and as you encounter these exceptions, you will start to become familiar with them. And you will be able to keep up with what exceptions there are. But it comes with time. I can't teach you all the exceptions because there's always just so many. And it would overload you with information. So for now, we're just going to stick to the basic rules, and over time, you will develop the exceptions. So that's my final point. Now, I just want to quickly go over the homework that you're going to have. My assistant just handed this page out to you that tells you a story of Jang Gyum. So she's an intelligent Korean student, but she can be forgetful. And she would like to visit Canada soon, and her friend is advising her to find out what documents she needs to bring so that she can go and get them in advance. She does this so that she doesn't run into, or she wouldn't run into, unexpected trouble. And she doesn't want to go to travel and then realize that she forgot to renew her passport, for example. She's decided she wants to go to Canada no matter what. And her passport should be up to date as of next week. But it turns out there's another document that she needs. So I want you to fill in the blanks of this script with either should or would. Every single blank will be either should or would. And then I want you to determine or figure out if there's anything else you think Jung Kim should know about. And this way you would help her and she would definitely appreciate it. So that's the homework. We're out of time. I'll send this out to you as well so that you can look at the instructions for the task next week if you'd like. And then we're going to come in, we're going to go over the instructions and do the task so that you can get into the feeling of using should and would together, because it's something that you'll encounter. So I'd like you to be familiar with it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.